History 8. This is our last history video. Remember, by the way, I recorded all these videos in one day, so don't think that I have been wearing the same outfit for like a week and a half. So this is our last history video. Can you believe it? We made it. So I hope that you guys have enjoyed some of these videos and they're not super boring for you. But yeah, I hope that you enjoy this and are learning something extra. And I hope you guys are watching the extra videos. Today I'm going to have two, one about the Panama Canal and one about the Boxer Rebellion. They're both pretty interesting. And yeah, I hope you enjoy them and watch them. So now American foreign policy kind of changed. It used to be the government would stay out of disputes between foreign countries because it's not our country, so why do we care? But then all of a sudden the United States decides that it's if it's in our interest, like if it'll help us out, then we will become involved. So if American trade and power could be advanced in these countries, or they could be protected from tyranny, then the United States would get involved, especially like in Latin America and Eastern Asia. And there were some mixed results. So just kind of, that's what's happening today. So anyway, so in Latin America, the proclamation of the Monroe Doctrine, which was all the way back in 1823, the United States had always protected its Latin American neighbors. For example, the United States drove French forces out of Mexico in 1867. The United States also mediated a boundary dispute that was between Venezuela and British Guyana. Now it's just Guyana in 1895. And then by 1900, the U.S. had become the leader of the Western Hemisphere. We were kind of like the big brother to all of these other nations. So another goal for the United States in Latin America was to build a canal. There were naval officers that wanted a canal to be built across Central America. It would enable the few ships in the American fleet to defend both the Atlantic and the Pacific coast more easily, because it could move ships very quickly between, well, not very quickly, but quicker, through the two oceans. The Spanish-American War helped prove that America did need this canal. During the war, it took 2 months to sail all the way around, because what you had to do, say you were like up in Oregon, it says Puget Sound, which is Oregon, Washington area, and you want to get all the way to like New York, it takes like 2 months to go all the way around, because you got to go all the way down and around South America. And so it just doesn't work, especially if you have a military fleet that needs to get back and forth. Remember, this is before airplanes, and so it's just not successful. And so the United States thought that maybe Nicaragua was the best place to build a canal, but later decided to build it in Panama. In the early 1900s, it was part of Colombia. So the United States offered Colombia $10 million for the right to build this canal. And then they were going to have an annual, like a yearly rental fee of $250,000. Colombia said no, they wanted $25 million. And so the United States was like, I don't think so. So the United States decided to go another route. And so what they did is there were opposition leaders in Panama, and they wanted to be independent. So America was like, hey, if they're independent, and they get their independence, they would probably sell the rights to us because we helped them. And so the Americans wasted no time. There were several warships that moved into positions off the Panamanian coast on November 2nd of 1903. The next day, they rioted, not the United States, the Panamanians rioted and declared their independence from Colombia. Colombia tried to send troops to stop the violence, but American ships blocked that. And so the rebels overcame the Colombian opposition within Panama. So then on November 6th, so 4 days later, the United States granted Panama diplomatic recognition, meaning they were officially declared their own country. On November 18th, the United States signed the let's see if I can say his name, Buenaventura, sorry, I mess it up every time, treaty with Panama, and the Secretary of State, John Hay, and Panama's new foreign minister, Philippe Jean Buenaventura, negotiated generous terms. I'm so sorry. I am terrible at speaking other languages. So anyway, the United States got use of a 10-mile wide strip of land for forever. The United States would control and defend this canal zone. It would build a canal that would open to all nations equally. You would just pay a toll. So like every nation could use it. It wasn't just for the United States. You just had to pay like a certain amount of money to go through. 11 years later, the Panama Canal opened. In 1977, President Jimmy Carter signed a new treaty with Panama, and it would give Panama ownership of the canal in 2000, and I think that went through as it's supposed to be, so they own it now. So anyway, and we just pay tolls to use it. So there is a box here with more details. It's pretty interesting. Also, there is a picture of Teddy Roosevelt. He actually went to Panama, and you can see him sitting in one of the, I think it's a steam shovel, it says. Yeah, a steam shovel during a rainstorm, because work down there was horrible. I'm going to talk about that in a second. And there's a video I want you to watch that talks about like conditions and stuff. Like working conditions were awful. People died from disease. It just wasn't good. So they were led by Ferdinand de Lesseps, the mastermind behind the Suez Canal. The French actually were the ones who began to build a canal across Panama in 1881. They stopped though because they were almost like completely financially ruined, and there was a great loss of life from disease. Kind of like we talked about the yellow fever, that's an issue here too. The Americans had also considered a canal, but they could not decide where to locate it. So then Americans wanted to take over and just finish this project because it had already been started. Why not keep going with it? Other citizens we talked about wanted to cut through Nicaragua to the north. The debate in the Senate hinged on two things. First of all, there was a senator, Mark Hanna. He spoke convincingly in favor of Panama using detailed maps, charts, engineering plans, and endorsements by different engineers. Second, during the debates, Mount Pelee in the Caribbean erupted, and that created concern about volcanic activity in Nicaragua because you obviously don't want a volcano ruining your canal. Interrupting it. The Nicaraguans had denied that they had any volcanoes, but obviously that was wrong. When Hannah actually discovered there was a postage stamp from there that actually had an erupting volcano, which was Mama Tombo, and he bought a bunch of the stamps and he mailed them to each of the senators right before they voted. So obviously they saw, oh, there are volcanoes. So anyway, sorry, I've been talking too long. My voice is getting a little dry. So anyway, the final tally was 42-34 in favor of the Panama route. They recognized Hannah's influence over the vote, and they began calling the canal the Panama Canal. Teddy Roosevelt became president in 1901, and his goal about the canal was to solve the problem of disease. So he named William Gorgas. We talked about him. He was an authority on tropical diseases. He also was a Christian to head this task. And building on the experiments of Walter Reed, who was that other Christian doctor we talked about who exposed people to the disease to see if it was really from mosquitoes or not. I'm sorry if you can hear that noise. That's my dog drinking water. Anyway, so they worked to isolate victims of malaria and yellow fever so the diseases would not spread. Because the problem is if a mosquito bites a person that has malaria or yellow fever and they obviously bite another person, then that person just got yellow fever. So they're trying to isolate those people. And he also eradicated the two types of mosquitoes that carry the disease. So they were really trying to get rid of those mosquitoes. James J. Hill was the empire builder of Great Northern Railroad fame. He suggested John Stevens to be the engineer of this project. He gave Gorgas what he needed to accomplish his health objectives, his goals, and prepared everything for beginning construction. He also tripled the workforce, which came from 97 different countries. So they did not just use Americans, they used kind of whoever wanted to work on it. Colonel George W. Goethals supervised the construction for 7 years. It required 61 million pounds of dynamite. The most productive month was 1909, when 68 steam shovels removed more than 2 million cubic yards of soil. That was 10 times the largest amount the French had ever removed. There were a lot of fears about this project, though, so Roosevelt actually went to Panama himself during the construction. That's what that picture's from. He went during November, which is the peak of the rainy season, so he could see it under the worst conditions. And it's not, it wasn't a good, working environment. He inspected every conceivable activity. He praised the work of the men that were working. It's quoted that Roosevelt viewed the canal project as though it were a mighty battle in which the national honor was at stake. His most famous action was jumping from his train in the rain and climbing aboard the steam shovel, which you saw the photograph. It was in newspapers across the United States, and his term of office unfortunately ended before they completed the canal. It was completed in 1914 during Woodrow Wilson's presidency. So just kind of a little bit of information. So here are some pictures of the Panama Canal. The Panama Canal did have to be widened some. Obviously our ships, oh my gosh, are bigger today than they used to be. There's that image. I'm sorry, my printer is not happy with me, and you can just kind of see it's really neat. It's something that I think would be really cool to just go on a cruise or something and have to go through the Panama Canal. That would be super fun. There is going to be a video on the Panama Canal, by the way, so make sure you go and look at that. So then we have Teddy Roosevelt and the big stick. You might be wondering what. And so he was president in 1901, and he applied his foreign policy in Latin America with the same just zest he showed on his charge up the San Juan Hill. He said, "I've always been fond of the West African proverb, speak softly and carry a big stick, you will go far." So he believed that the United States was the most important nation in the Western Hemisphere, and the Caribbean was just like an American lake. And so he believed in relying on our military strength to persuade foreign nations to act properly. So he's like, we don't even have to do anything. We just can show like our big stick, our big military, and it will keep people from acting out. I do have a picture of one of the, it's a cartoon from that time period of Roosevelt with his big stick. And it shows him putting boats behind him, and like one's debt collector, one's the sheriff, and it has different countries around the border, so you can kind of see that. So there you go. I think we're almost done with pictures. I know you guys are probably like, these pictures are terrible. So anyway, in 1902, Britain, Germany, and Italy sent warships to blockade Venezuelan ports. They were there because Venezuela was not paying back their debts that they owed to these countries. Venezuela asked the United States to intervene. Great Britain was like, hey, Roosevelt, will you come and mediate, kind of make a deal between us, like help us make a deal? He obliged. He saw the incident as a warning that European interests in Latin America were growing. So he realized as European countries, Esme, hey, sorry, hold on. Esme, stop. Thank you. Sorry, oh, you didn't hear her. That was obnoxious. Anyway, so he realizes that European nations want more things out of Latin America. And so he viewed that presence, like their interest in this, as a violation of the Monroe Doctrine. So he issued what's called the Roosevelt Corollary. It's just kind of as an add-on to the Monroe Doctrine. It pretty much made the United States an international police power. So the United States had reserved the right to intervene and set things right if they felt like, they were out of line. So it kind of makes like the United States the police of, our side of the ocean, or our side of the world. So during the next 60 years, the United States sent forces to Cuba, Venezuela, the Dominican Republic, Haiti, Nicaragua, Guatemala, and Mexico. Now you're like, so do these countries like that? No, for the most part, they don't. A lot of Latin American Americans and these nations began to view America as an unwelcome, powerful neighbor. And so they weren't necessarily a fan of it. Now, there were other presidents who come in and they have different ideas. One of them is William Howard Taft. Yes, he is the guy who was rumored to get stuck in a bathtub. We actually don't think he did. He just replaced the bathtub so he didn't get stuck. But it's still funny. So he liked to use dollar diplomacy. So his idea was that Latin American countries could set up industries and it helped Latin America in other ways. But if these countries did not follow the wishes of the United States would just pull their money. So like if they don't have money, they can't do it. So we'll just give them money. It's kind of like almost a bribe. We'll give them money, and if they're not following the rules, then we'll just take that money back. President Woodrow Wilson and Secretary of State William Jennings Bryan, they turned this policy into moral diplomacy, meaning they would use negotiations rather than threatening to use force or cause financial loss. They did not want to pressure countries into decisions. They preferred to talk to them into following this example. Wilson believed the force of America is the force of moral principle. He just felt like we were like the standard of morals. Obviously we're not, but he thought that. He tried to promote democratic principles and secure American interests overseas while maintaining peace on all fronts. His policy, though, was too idealistic. It kind of made humans too moral. We know that that's not necessarily true. And so he was forced to send troops into the Dominican Republic. Right before he left office, Haiti and Mexico and the United States ended up fighting in a world war. So obviously that moral diplomacy doesn't really work. It would work if humans were perfect. I was going to say popular. No, if we were perfect, but unfortunately because of sin and because we just, we want what's best for us, not necessarily best for everybody, it has caused some problems. So by the late 1800s, then we have some issues in Asia. China became one of the most profitable trading spots in the world. Britain, France, Germany, Russia, and Japan divided China into spheres of influence. And what that pretty much means is it's like the nations that they have like the nations they control, or the nations they have contact with, the nations they're influencing. And so they kind of control all trade operations within its sphere or division of the country. The United States was not part of this arrangement because like in China, it was like broken up into pieces, and each nation, like Britain had one section, France had another, Germany had another, Russia and Japan. And so obviously that's going to cause some issues. Obviously, the United States, though, wants some trading opportunities with China because it's huge, and they have a lot of different, goods they want to trade. And so the United States wants part of this, and obviously these nations are not going to necessarily want that. So some of the foreign powers in China wanted more than control of trade. They wanted land. They wanted, chunks of China. Japan and some European nations started to seize land and establish colonies there. The United States objected to this colonization in China because they wanted China to be open to trade for everyone, not just those countries. So in 1899, Secretary of State John Hay sent a series of letters to the countries involved in China. They were stated as an open door policy. No longer would any nation have its own sphere. All of China would be open to all nations equally. China's regions were not united at this time. No army existed to protect them. China really didn't have a choice but to tolerate the foreign trade invasion. But some Chinese people aligned themselves with a secret group. It was called the Society of Righteous and Harmonious Fists, that had been formed many years earlier. Foreigners called this group the Boxers because one of its rituals was shadow boxing. And they opposed government control of any kind, whether foreign or domestic, but the Empress of China deflected their energies from opposing her government to opposing foreigners. So what they wanted, the Boxers wanted all foreigners to leave China. Like, they want them out. And they started an uprising called the Boxer Rebellion. I do have like a image of it. It's not an actual picture. It's just a recreation of it. I do have a video on this, so I would like you to watch that. By the way, your code word for today is Boxer Rebellion. I don't think I gave you one for today. Did I? No. Maybe. I think I gave you 2 in one of my videos, didn't I? Okay, so your code word, oh my gosh. I feel like I gave you 2 the other day. Anyway, your code word for today, if I haven't already given you one, or give me one of the 2, I don't know what I did, is Boxer Rebellion. If I didn't, I feel like I gave you 2. But anyway, so Boxer Rebellion is your code word for today, or if I gave you one earlier, just send me that one. Yeah, I've been writing them down, but I think I messed up somewhere, because I think I gave you yellow journalism, then I think I gave yellow fever. But I thought I did Rough Riders too. Maybe I didn't do Rough Riders. But anyway, so today's is... Sorry, I'm getting distracted by myself. Boxer Rebellion. So anyway, it began in rural areas and then moved to what is now Beijing. The Boxers surrounded and terrorized sections of the city where foreigners lived. They murdered some foreigners, unfortunately. They also attacked and killed many Chinese Christians because they felt like those Chinese Christians, were obviously influenced by outsiders and were bringing that influence into their country. The foreigners and Chinese Christians took refuge together, and they tried to hold out until they could get help. The United States did try to protect the lives of American citizens in China. The first U.S. effort on June 10th, 1900 was forced back. Then by August, John Hay put together a force of 20,000 men from 11 countries, and they marched in and freed the hostages. Some countries involved in the rescue thought that they should earn land from helping, but under the Boxer Protocol, which was signed September 7th, 1901, they said, no, let's not do that. The Chinese officials responsible for it were executed. 25 Chinese forts were destroyed, and China had to pay damages of $333 million over the next 40 years. The United States put most of its share of the reparations in damage payments into a fund to help educate Chinese students in America. Some of the funds were used to build schools and colleges in China, so they did try to use this money to help Chinese Americans and just the Chinese people. And American churches and mission boards sent personnel and money to China. Because of such efforts, the Chinese were friendlier to the United States than to other imperialist powers. The U.S. and China remained friends until the communists took over China in 1949. So we did have a good relationship for quite a long time. Now it's a little back and forth. You never really know. So then we have the United States and China, or in Japan. We just talked about China. Now Japan. So Commodore Matthew Perry, we talked about him in the Navy, opened Japan to trade with the outside world in 1853. Japan quickly increased in power because they obviously have more money. In less than 40 years, it was able to transform itself into a modern industrial and military power. It's a short step from militarism to imperialism. So Japan began to demand a sphere of influence from China, which we just talked about. The First Sino-Japanese War, Japan easily defeated the Chinese and took the land it wanted. In addition, Japan then joined the international force that defeated the Boxers. Then in 1905, Japan defeated Russia in the Russo-Japanese War. Then John Hay and President Roosevelt tried to use American power in Asia to maintain a balance of power. They wanted to make sure, no nation was too large. And so Roosevelt foresaw the threat that Japan could become. He believed the United States' power could offset Japan's power and that the United States should command the respect of the world. So in 1905, he persuaded representatives from Russia and Japan to meet him on a ship. And he helped negotiate a treaty. It maintained a balance of power in Asia while upholding Chinese independence. And so for those efforts, he actually won the Nobel Peace Prize, and he was the first American president to be given this honor. Then in 1907, Roosevelt made a dramatic show of American military strength. He sent the entire U.S. battle fleet on a world cruise. Congress actually protested it because it was just really expensive, but the ships went anyway. They were called the Great White Fleet because of their color, and they visited Japanese ports and so impressed the Japanese that their imperialistic designs were curbed for the time being. It kind of made them, it was kind of the big stick thing, right? We didn't do anything to, we didn't promise violence or anything. We just showed, look at all of our pretty ships. And they were like, ooh, we'll stay here and not try to, go anywhere else. So I do have kind of a picture actually from this Great White Fleet. Let me move my book and I'll show you. Maybe this angle will work better. Huh, it does. Look at that. So there is the Great White Fleet. And here is just kind of a map of where they went around the world. So it's pretty impressive. There were even... at the time, there was this huge, I'm trying to think where it was. I think it was in Italy. There was a huge disaster in Italy, and they actually sent one or two of the ships there to try and help. So the Great White Fleet did make a difference for world, us on the world stage. So I hope you guys are excited. You guys are done with history. You have one assignment on Friday. Which is the test for this chapter, and then you will be completely done with history. So don't forget to send me the code word for today, and which I remember what it is, and hopefully I didn't mess those up. I feel like I did, but yeah, I hope you guys have a great day, a great summer if I don't see you. I miss you all. I will see you guys in the fall, hopefully back at school in our classrooms. Yeah, and if you guys need something, just reach out. I'm around. I'll be around all summer. I'm not going anywhere. So, yeah, I hope to see you guys very soon. I miss you all. And yeah, bye.